A Russian fighter jet just went down in a dogfight, and the pilot who did it was flying an American F-16. At the exact same time, something strange has been happening across Russia. Massive fireballs, entire warehouses turning to ash, and it's not a military base getting hit. It's Russia's version of Amazon. 2 stories, same week, and they're both telling you the exact same thing about where this war is headed. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why Ukraine started blowing up a shopping website, and how a jet that spent 2 years defending against drones just scored a historic kill against one of Russia's most advanced fighters. Let's start with the retailer, because on the surface this sounds almost absurd. Wildberries is Russia's biggest online marketplace, the equivalent of Amazon, founded back in 2004 by a young teacher named Tatiana Kim, who is now the wealthiest woman in the country. Tens of millions of Russians use it every single day to buy clothes, electronics, groceries, basically everything. And over the course of a single week, Ukrainian drones hit no less than 5 of its warehouses. This wasn't some accidental strike or a stray hit on the wrong building. This was deliberate, repeated, and it happened in waves. It started over a weekend when drones slammed into 2 massive facilities, one in Elektrostal, just east of Moscow, and another in the Tambov region. The scale of the damage was staggering. 8 people were killed, dozens more injured, and the Elektrostal warehouse alone covers more than 360,000 square meters and employs over 8,000 people. It took firefighters 3 full days just to put out the blaze. Then, just when it looked like that might be the end of it, Ukraine struck again on Wednesday, hitting 2 more Wildberries facilities down south in Krasnodar and Stavropol. 1 more person died, 14 were hurt, and if that wasn't enough, a 3rd wave followed within days after that, hitting even more locations in Krasnodar and a city called Nevinomysk, injuring at least 10 more people. So here's the question everybody's asking. Why is a country at war spending expensive long-range drones on a shopping website instead of tanks and artillery? And this is where the real reason comes in, and it's more calculated than people realize. President Zelensky came out and addressed it directly. He said these strikes targeted logistics centers that were involved in supplying the Russian military with drone components, navigation equipment, and other critical gear. In other words, Ukraine's intelligence believes Wildberries wasn't just selling clothes and electronics. It was quietly functioning as a supply pipeline, feeding parts into Russia's war machine. And once you start digging, that claim actually holds up. Investigators found that the platform had dual-use items listed openly for sale. Things like body armor, combat helmets, and camouflage clothing. Items that serve civilians, but just as easily equip soldiers on the front line. There's no public confirmation that Wildberries had any official cooperation with Russia's defense ministry. But when a platform this massive is moving military-relevant components at scale, it becomes a legitimate target whether the company intended that role or not. But there's a second layer to this, and it's just as important. These strikes came right after Russia hit facilities belonging to Nova Pochta, which is essentially Ukraine's own version of a national logistics and postal company. Zelensky openly framed the Wildberries attacks as a direct response to that. This is what modern warfare has become. It's not just soldiers facing soldiers on a front line anymore. It's economies attacking economies, supply chains attacking supply chains, and ordinary infrastructure that regular people rely on every single day getting pulled directly into the crossfire. And the financial damage here is enormous. Early estimates put the cost of restoring these 4 destroyed facilities at nearly $460 million, and that's a bill Russian insurance companies are unlikely to fully cover. Roughly 7% of the company's entire logistics capacity got wiped out in a matter of days. But the most human part of this story is the small business owners. Wildberries isn't just one giant corporation. It's a marketplace that thousands of independent merchants across Russia depend on to sell their products. In the days after these strikes, people started flooding social media, many of them in tears, describing how months of inventory, their entire livelihoods, had been sitting inside those warehouses and were now just gone. A military analyst put it bluntly, saying that given the scale of these facilities and their role feeding both civilian life and the military-industrial complex, this tactic is almost certainly going to continue. Now let's shift to the skies, because while Russia's economy was burning on the ground, something historic was happening in the air. For nearly 2 years, Ukraine's F-16 fleet has played a very specific and limited role. They've been used almost entirely on defense, shooting down incoming Shahed drones and intercepting cruise missiles before they could hit Ukrainian cities. They were a shield, not a sword. That changed just days ago. The chairman of the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, stood in front of the Senate and confirmed something that had never happened before in this entire war. A Ukrainian F-16 shot down a Russian fighter jet in direct air-to-air combat. Let that sink in for a moment. This is the first confirmed instance of an American-made F-16 flown by a Ukrainian pilot, going head-to-head with a modern Russian fighter and winning. According to General Kane, the Russian aircraft involved was a Su-35S, one of Russia's most capable multi-role fighters, in service since 2014 and considered a serious upgrade over the older Su-27 platform Russia has flown for decades. Here's how the engagement reportedly unfolded, based on details that have surfaced from Ukrainian defense sources. It wasn't a lone F-16 stumbling into a lucky shot. It was coordinated, deliberate, and tactical. A Ukrainian MiG-29 flew in first and simulated an attack on a ground target, essentially acting as bait to lure the Russian Su-35 into position. Once the Russian fighter took that bait and moved in, 2 Ukrainian F-16s were already waiting. One of them fired, the Su-35 went down. Russia's Ministry of Defense has not officially acknowledged losing the aircraft, which is fairly typical. But pro-Russian military bloggers on Telegram, the same channels that usually break this kind of news from the Russian side, confirmed that a Su-35 did in fact go down, and that the pilot ejected and survived. Interestingly, some of those same channels tried a different narrative, claiming the jet was actually brought down by a Patriot missile battery rather than the F-16. But the United States military, at the very highest level, has now gone on record crediting the kill to the F-16 directly. General Kane connected this moment to something much bigger than a single dogfight. He explained that Ukraine's ability to scale what he called its layered air defense system has come an incredibly long way over the past several years, with support from multiple partner nations. What that really means is this: Ukraine now has a network of ground radar, early warning systems, and possibly even Swedish-donated airborne surveillance aircraft, all feeding real-time data to pilots in the cockpit. That kind of coordinated system is exactly what a NATO-style air force looks like, and it's exactly what allowed 2 F-16s and a MiG-29 to execute a setup this precise against a modern Russian jet. It's worth remembering just how hard Ukraine had to fight to even get these F-16s in the first place. They spent close to 2 years lobbying Western governments before the first second-hand jets, donated by Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Norway, finally arrived back in August of 2024. These aircraft weren't brand new either. Most were originally built between 1982 and 1990, then modernized between 2000 and 2015. And despite that age, they're now flying with modern NATO weapons, including AIM-120 radar-guided missiles, AIM-9X heat-seeking missiles, and precision-guided bombs. Ukraine is expected to eventually field around 100 of these jets in total. This single confirmed kill proves that even with older airframes, when you pair them with modern missiles and a serious detection network, they can go toe-to-toe with some of Russia's best. So now, step back and look at both of these stories sitting next to each other in the same week, because that's really the point of this entire video. On one side, Ukraine is reaching deep into Russian territory and setting fire to the economic infrastructure that keeps the war funded and supplied. On the other side, Ukraine's Air Force just proved it can now hunt and kill Russia's advanced fighters instead of just surviving against them. Neither of these is an isolated headline. They're both signs of the exact same shift. This war has moved from a stage where Ukraine was purely trying to survive Russian pressure into a stage where Ukraine is actively taking the fight to Russia, on the ground, in the economy, and now in the air. What happens next is the part everyone should be watching closely. If these Wildberries-style strikes continue, and defense analysts already believe they will, expect Russia's wartime economy to feel a slow, grinding kind of pressure that a single missile strike could never achieve. And if Ukrainian F-16s keep proving they can win air-to-air engagements against frontline Russian fighters, that changes the entire risk calculation for Russian pilots operating anywhere near the front. 2 very different battles, fought with 2 very different tools, but both aimed at the exact same goal: forcing Russia to feel the true cost of this war in ways it hasn't had to feel before. This is exactly the kind of shift that tends to define how a long war eventually turns. Make sure you're subscribed, because both of these stories are still developing, and the next chapter of this Frontline is coming faster than most people expect.